Hi, this is my review of Era Survival Definitive Edition Rulebook. If you haven't seen my review of the Core Rulebook for Era Survival, I recommend that you check out the link in the description below, because this review is going to focus exclusively on the changes, on what's new of the Definitive Edition Rulebook when compared to the standard rulebook. Now, let's talk about the quality of the PDF. It doesn't have bookmarks yet, but bookmarks will be added in the future. But it's fully hyperlinked, that is, the table of contents has everything neatly organized, so you can click in any of the different sections to go to that particular area of the rules, of the background story, etc. The graphic design is great, like the other books of Era Survival. The illustrations are also awesome and they express the theme and the story perfectly. However, there is a bit of an issue at this moment when it comes to the resolution of the images, but that will be fixed in the future. So keep that in mind. Here I will show you some of the images of the Definitive Edition version. As you can see, they are a bit blurry, but I'm going to be using the images from the standard rulebook. So keep that in mind if you plan to get this as a PDF, because you can get it both as a physical book or as a digital book. So you may want to keep that in mind. Everything is well written, organized and explained. However, I think I did spot a few typos, like 2 or 3. Now, let's talk about the contents of this Definitive Edition rulebook. The main difference with the standard rulebook is that in the Definitive Edition, you have 2 expansions included. That is the Infected Manual and the Tales of the Outlands expansion. The Infected Manual adds a lot of mutations. This basically allows you to come up with any sort of mutant imaginable. Whether you have seen such a thing in movies or comic books or in your own imagination, you can build that particular monstrosity using this list of mutations. I have already reviewed the Infected Manual on its own, and I'm going to put the link in the description below so you can check that out. This Definitive Edition rulebook also includes the Tales of the Outlands expansion, that is basically a lot of background information and new equipment. I have already reviewed that expansion as well, so check out the link in the description too, because I go into further detail about that. It really adds to the background of the world of Era Survival, and it brings some very weird and fascinating elements, a lot of mythology of Era Survival. What is new and exclusive of the Definitive Edition is the inclusion of new stories, new background information. There is a lot of juicy fiction for you to create your own adventures and campaigns based around the elements presented in those short stories. However, there is a lot of more detail when it comes to how different factions and organizations and the individuals within the world of Era Survival carry out their duties and their everyday lives. Now, I'm going to talk to you about those stories without giving away spoilers, because I think they are very interesting for you to read and become surprised with the world of Era Survival. I think these additional stories create some links between what has already been presented lore-wise, and it strengthens the cohesion of Era Survival. What is presented in the fiction allows you to perfectly portray or roleplay the life of any person in the world of Gaia, the world of Era Survival. You see how life on Gaia is very harsh. There is very little room for mercy. There are some brilliant acts of kindness, but for the most part, people are too pragmatic, sometimes predatorial and neurotic, perhaps even psychotic, focused completely on surviving. There are just a few groups that have the advantage or privilege of enjoying life. Most of them, they are just focused on surviving. It's quite stressful, obviously, and you can see how it takes a toll on them, physically and mentally. You can see how, for example, the runners, which are the couriers and messengers in this world of Gaia, they have to face so many dangers. They have to risk it all. You can also see the actions of the different factions and organizations. For example, you see the nihilists, how they are bent on destroying any civilized area and populations, even if they have to resort to lying, poisoning, getting people sick. You can also see how, for example, the potestates break their cultists mentally. They get them into a sense of complete despair, and then they appear as saviors. So their victims eventually become their servants. You can see how the defenders are quite heroic, moving across the world of Gaia, trying to protect and save as many as they can. You can see how the defenders are very active in their strategies and tactics to rescue other people, but also are fighting against other factions. You can see the dangers in the life of a vault hunter. Remember that vaults in Era Survival are basically abandoned facilities that house technology, research, anything that gives you an edge or an advantage in this post-apocalyptic world. So vault hunters are either hired or they search for these vaults on their own, trying to obtain the riches within. However, many of these vaults have been trapped, or they are infested by mutants, or maybe they have been taken by a rival faction. So there are many dangers involved with exploring a vault, and many vault hunter groups start out with many members, but as they suffer deaths, their numbers are drastically reduced, so that they have a lot of difficulties when trying to transport what they find inside the vaults with just a few members. You get a really good sense of how humans in the world of Gaia have become really tough, very strong. Some of the injuries and battles that they face, it's obvious that they enter some sort of animalistic way of thinking, or perhaps survival state, to the point that they are incredibly tough and resilient. Although they do die, they are still human after all, but it's still quite heroic to see how much they are willing to endure as they try to accomplish an objective or mission. It's obvious that there are some differences when it comes to the luxury that the different people in Gaia enjoy. Those that live in, for example, city, they almost seem stable in their lifestyle. They enjoy many commodities that other inhabitants of the world of Gaia simply cannot afford. But city also holds its own dangers. There are many shady dealings and nefarious plans. And when it comes to the other side of things, some inhabitants of the world of Gaia have to constantly move around. They never know when mutants or members of a violent faction, such as for example the Swarm, can attack them and take anything that they have gathered so far. That is why defenders are so important in this setting, and some of the other factions gathering together just to survive. You can see the induction or recruitment process taken by the different factions, like for example the White Cross. It feels a lot like a sort of monastic order of sorts. They are the ones who discovered injection, which is basically the only cure to fend off the mutation process. They even have the entire formula of injection tattooed on their backs. Some of the stories are quite gruesome, very intense and raw. And some stories I actually had to pause for a bit as I imagined what was actually going on. There are some stories that relate to research, but also torture. So you can see how there are some really twisted, sick individuals in the world of Gaia with no empathy at all. You can see how some places, because of the way of life that they have chosen, some aspects of their culture have been drastically affected. Because, for example, the citizens of Aqua, which is basically an island city of sorts, because they have little contact with the outside world, they make it a top priority. If they actually need something from land, they are willing to negotiate or bargain. They are even willing to sell their own children, because a child from Aqua is very expensive, because they have been separated from land and they rely on seafood and basically foodstuffs that are not at risk of being contaminated with parasites that cause the mutations. The child of Aqua is supposed to be a human being or a potential adult of great quality. You can also see how the infected and the swarm are a constant threat, and those that, like the cult of progression that worship the mutants, they are a real danger. They have lost all contact with humanity. They have this very twisted vision of how the world should be and how being a savage mutant is the next step in human evolution. You also have some stories that are not too radical or drastic. They focus on the everyday lives of the inhabitants of Gaia. You see some very average things, despite all the dangers because of the conflicts with the other factions, the mutations. You can see how people try to get by with day-to-day labors, etc. So, let me tell you what I think of Era Survival Definitive Edition Rulebook. This is a great definitive edition because it contains the entire core rules, but also the material in the Infected Manual, in the Tales of the Outlands expansion, and it contains new stories as well. But the real question is it worth getting this? Well, if you already own the standard core rulebook, I think only if you are a collector. That is, it will be perhaps more practical to buy the standard rulebook and then the Infected Manual and then Tales of the Outlands, and that's just if you need more mutations, then you get the Infected Manual. If you need more background information, then you get Tales of the Outlands, or if you want a bit more equipment. But if you already own the standard rulebook, I would consider this just an option. But if you have yet to play Era Survival, I will definitely get the Definitive Edition rulebook. Perhaps you will prefer to get it as a physical book, but keep in mind, if you get it as a PDF, I think you should ask at Joe at first if they have already fixed that resolution problem. Even though it's not that bad, it could be a bit annoying. But do keep in mind that that resolution issue will be fixed, as some of the issues that I have found in different Era books have been fixed, so you can be certain of that. So overall, if you already have the standard rulebook, this is a really nice option. If you haven't gotten into Era Survival yet, start with the Definitive Edition rulebook. I think it's worth it to have everything in one place. Or if you have a bit of a tight budget when it comes to gaming, well, then you should get the core rulebook first, the normal book, and then the Infected Manual and the Tales of the Outlands expansion separately, unless you really want the extra background information presented in the new stories for the Definitive Edition. Well, thanks for watching my review. Remember to check out the links below. I'm also including the link to the website of Shades of Vengeance, so you can find Era Survival books and many other things. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.